Uh, oh, all right, we live.
What's good,
You
everybody? How y'all doing?
Chilling,
chilling,
chilling.
chilling, chilling. You know the vibes.
We just got off a good episode. Crypto and real estate. I guess we gotta do like a 2.0 version. The feedback was
Yeah,
really
Yeah,
good. I think so a lot of some of my friends who listened to it said they really liked like how we did make it like a versus thing, and how we
yeah,
yeah,
talked about crypto. We talked about real estate, which is obviously what we dropped yesterday. So a lot of people haven't seen that yet, but the ones who did say that they liked, like, making it practical.
mm,
The one recommendation I got from friends, we could talk about this later, was like, so we talked about like, okay, how to play with real estate, but most of what we talked about was like, if you have like 10 grand, 20 grand, you have the money for down payment, but in reality, a lot of people don't have that bread. So what are some realistic ways to raise money if you don't have 10, 20K to start in the real estate game?
mm.
And I thought it'd be interesting. So we could talk about like wholesaling, rental arbitrage. There are different ways to raise funds if you don't have those to get started into like buying and owning. But we could talk about that in a different episodes.
definitely.
But anyways, the feedback was good. So I really like the idea of, okay, for those who don't have money, want to get started, what is a good, and don't necessarily have high earning jobs like, I mean, we do. What is a good way for them to sort of like raise funds and sort of like kickstart some of the things we spoke about? So I thought that was definitely something we should keep in the pipeline for the future.
Yeah,
But what do we talk about today,
definitely.
guys?
If I take it off,
So basically, this week we're going to be talking about certain expectations or guidelines you should probably set for yourself coming out of school. Like, as soon as I graduate, what should I do to set myself up to generate wealth, to generate income, to have a high net worth? So that's basically what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, yeah.
bet.
Now, I like this topic too because a lot of people don't think about like planning and stacking till like in their 30s. And
Mm,
even for a lot of us, in fact, I would say a lot of us who sometimes earning a high salary straight out of college could be a trap too, because a lot of
yeah,
us get very comfortable. And I'm not to dog. I mean, earning six figures is admirable. Like if you are young in your early 20s, especially if you're black in a country like USA. But the mistake people make is they don't realize quickly how your 120, $130,000 salary as a young single person with no kids and no responsibilities, that's a good chunk, right? But
yeah,
people don't realize how that could easily quickly become, I don't want to say nothing because that would be condescending and dismissive of the reality of a lot of Americans, which is
yeah,
the average family income is not up to that. But you definitely won't be, let me just say it this way, you definitely won't be able to have the same expendable income and live the same lifestyle you would as a single person versus if you are sustaining a household or family, or responsibility or dependent with that
yeah,
income. And let's be real, for those of us in corporate America, we know the salary increase rate is so abysmal. Like we're talking
yeah,
3%, 4% a year. If you get a promotion, maybe 8%. If you switch jobs, that's where you get the good chunk. But
mm,
most times, a lot of these companies are giving you just enough raise to keep up with the rate of inflation. So,
mm-hmm.
you really have to start thinking about things like additional income, saving, investing, dollar cost averaging, leveraging compounding interest, and things like
Yeah,
that to really like grow your net worth so you can continue to sustain the lifestyle you wish. But that's just something I wanted to just preface this conversation with. But I'll leave the floor open to Ife. What is your views on this topic?
So basically, I'm just going to go back to in 20, when did I graduate? 2018, right? I remember 2018,
Yeah.
2017. I was in Nigeria, but like I was born here, so I had a Robin Hood. And I was like, man, I really didn't know anything about stocks or things then. I was like, I really don't care. And I don't remember, I cannot remember what the price of Bitcoin was then. I think Bitcoin just spiked and then it had its massive fall off. And like,
Mhm.
I'm just remembering at those times, if I had known that, okay, I could just invest everything I make, like, in Nigeria, you're not even making a lot, but like if you just take a chunk of that and save it, or just buy this asset, or buy this stock, or buy this Forex pair, or buy something, you could set yourself up for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? And it's just like coming here, I learned so much. And like I'm on David's Patreon, so I learned a lot. Like I learned about IULs, Roth IRA. So those are important things. Like I did not know what a Roth IRA was before 2019. I did not even know the IUL was before I met David. So it's like those are things that are very important. Like we live in a society where you could be making 200K. 200K comes with 200K of expenses. I really don't care what anybody says that you live the same frugal lifestyle. On average, the normal person is not going to live the same lifestyle if they double their income, right?
Sure.
So like, and now imagine, like, I'm not trying to put this out there as like, gender wars, but guys in the typical day and age are expected to like, provide for their woman, provide for their wife, provide for their children and all that. So like, there's just a lot of stuff you got to take care of early, because in the future, you don't want to be in a position where you're like, oh, I should have planned out earlier. I should have did this earlier. And it's very essential.
Yeah. So I'll take you back to the basics. Like coming out of college, right? I definitely didn't know how to save. So like I was just spending. So pretty much like coming out, make sure things like budgeting, you should like get that down packed real quick. Figure out your budget. Things like making money on the side, like OC said, like David said, like try to make money on things you like, just side hustles. Like you might, like, how we are when we come out of college, because we're always like, we got this vision in our head and we're just going with it. Like it could go well for a while. You never know what happens. Just figure out like certain ways to make money on the side with things you have. Things like figuring out how to use credit cards. I never knew how to use that. I remember people telling me in college, yo, you need to get this. Coming from Nigeria, my dad was like, debt is bad for you. Things like, it's obviously bad for you. So like my mindset was like, yo, I'm not getting no credit card till I get out of college. You know what I'm saying? Like I always used to be scared of getting a credit card, or like, I don't know where this money is coming from. I'm just getting free money. And that was my mindset. So I had to learn about that. Pretty much things like that, credit card, budgeting, learning how to save. Like, I'm not saying leave below your means, but figure it out. Like find the balance to like where you could like you could invest for your future and still enjoy your life right now. So those are like the things like
big facts.
No, I think contrary, I think when you're first starting off, until you start building investment funds, I actually 1,000% push for living below your means. People don't even know this. Like when I first started off, I was making a very nice salary. I wasn't making 6 figures here straight out of college, but I was making, my total compensation, when you consider my base salary, bonuses, and other cash compensation I received, it was very close to it. But I still lived in a pretty small apartment, starting out of college, was only $920. This was back in 2017. It was only $920 a month. I could have lived right in the heart of downtown I lived in Greenville, South Carolina, but I lived in a suburb. I intentionally lived in a suburb called Simpsonville. And part of the reason why I did that also was because it was very close to my job. I could have lived in downtown Greenville in a very nice apartment, penthouse, skyrise, would have only been 18, 19 minutes away from my job by drive. And that would have only cost me $1,600 a month. And I very well could afford that as rent. And I'll talk about a little bit how you can determine what you can afford, as I'll talk about now in budgeting as rent. But I could very well afford that as rent easily. But I chose to pay close to half that because I'm like, okay, I will live closer to work. Granted, it's not as nice as a very nice skyrise service apartment, but it does the job. And so I actually push for living below your means. And here's why. So I believe in something called so obviously we've heard about the 50-30-20 rule. If you don't know what that is, look it up. But for young people, actually push it a bit. I say, okay, your needs, if you're young, no kids, no family, starting out of college, it should not be 50-30-20. Actually push for, of your disposable income, your take home pay, actually say it should be 40, 35. That puts it at 75-25 rule. So 40, 35, 40, 35, 25 rule. And here's why, because I feel like while you're young, single, you have more room to play with your finances. You have more flex, if you will, and you should be focusing more on saving / investing. Now, let's break what that is. 40% goes towards your needs. Your needs are your recurring expenses. These are things that you just have to take care of. They're non-negotiable. So like your rent will fall under your needs. So we just talked about what you can afford. So when you look at your take-home pay, you look at 40%. The first things you want to, so you just remember you have 40% of your take-home pay to play with for. So let's just look at a typical example where your take-home pay is $4,000 a month, right? That's so $4,000 a month. 40% of that is $1,600, right? And so if you have $1,600, I'll say the first things you have to ask yourself, of that 1,600 things, I'll ask you, do you have any student loan debt? Right. So if you have student loan debt, the first thing I want to ask you is, okay, what is your student loan debt, and what is the monthly payment you have to make on your student loan debt? So if you tell me you have student loan debt and your monthly payment you have to make on your student loan is $300, I'll subtract that from the $1,600. That leaves you with $1,300. And I'll ask you, do you have any car notes? Do you have any other form of debt? So if you don't have any other form of debt, but maybe you have a car note, your car note is $200, I'll say 1,300 minus 200, 1,100. If you tell me you have no other debt, so basically your debt really will be your car notes and your student loans, which happens to be the case for most people coming out of college. I'll say $1,100 is what you can afford then for living expenses being rent and utilities. And so when you consider that, I tell people this is how you are strategically like positioning yourself to make sure you're living within the means and within a good budget, to make sure that you're not playing yourself down the road such that you don't have enough expendable income to save. So now that is how you determine what realistically you can afford as rent. Now, if you can afford to get somewhere where your living expenses will even be $900 rather than the $1,100, I'll say that extra $200 you're saving, throw it into savings, right? And then wants is 25%. Now, wants is obviously, I don't believe in like not enjoying yourself. Have fun, go for the happy hours, have fun. But remember, okay, if your income is $4,000,
just don't get caught up with
don't get caught up, right?
Yeah, you could get caught up.
If your income is $4,000, 25% of that, you have $1,000 a month to play with. So don't be out here doing more than that. And I will say, even though you're saving towards something, so let's say, for instance, my birthday is in June, and I know I want to go on this really nice boat trip, and I know it's going to cost me $3,000. Just know that you have to save 3 months worth of your want towards that. So it's not eating towards your savings or your emergency savings. And within all this, the 35% should go towards building your emergency savings. And what is your emergency savings? Realistically, that is, if you're in a stable job, I would consider computer science, Joe, actuarial mathematician like Ife, myself, an engineer. I'll say those are pretty stable incomes. We're in the STEM field, pretty stable, right? If we get laid off today, chances are you could probably find another job in 3 to 6 months. Hence why I say for your emergency savings, you want 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses and recurring debt. And so that's basically the 40% in your budget. So that 40%, if you budget properly, you want 3 to 6 months worth of that. And then if you're a business owner like myself, so you have to also factor in like money to sustain your business. So for instance, I own rental properties. I'll say, okay, my mortgages and other bills for my rental properties, I also want 3 to 6 months of that. So all of that will fall under my quote unquote emergency savings. And then once you build your emergency savings, that 35% that you've typically would go towards savings, you can then start leveraging that towards being something I call unit cost averaging. And so or dollar cost averaging, depending on, if you're in the USA, obviously it's called dollar cost averaging. And so you DCA, dollar cost average, DCA into like investments. And so that's where you start talking about what investments, whether it's cryptocurrency stocks, even like DCA into like even your rental properties in terms of like putting down more towards paying extra towards the principal if you have a mortgage, and building your equity there even quicker. And so there are different ways you can play with it and diversify your portfolio. And these are part of the things I do as a finance consultant. But it's, people don't realize this. Finances is a lot more intentional. So the mistake I do is I talk to a lot of kids. Let me not call them kids, but adults graduating college.
Kids.
Like I just had one dude. I apologize. They're not kids, but I just had one dude, and he did the best thing, because he literally said he's been following me, which is crazy. He said he's been following me since last year, May, since I launched the Easy Finances page. And he said he's been telling himself, if this was when I was even posting my threads and shit on Twitter, he said he's been telling himself that the day he graduates and gets his starts working and gets his like job and starts earning salary, the first thing he's gonna do is set up a one-to-one with me to plan his finances, because he's seen a lot of his friends who started and they've just all admitted, like, you know, have you ever been in that position where you look back, you look at how much you've earned in the past year and you're like, dang, where did all my money go? And he's like, he said he doesn't want to be in that position.
I promise.
And that's
yeah.
So he literally said that was the first thing he promised himself he was going to do. And literally he did it. He signed up for the Patreon. We set up a consultation. We even set up an extra finance consultation. And we talked about like literally this is how you're going to plan your finances. Now, obviously it's up to him to execute, but I really respected that, because I'm just like, that's a dude who knows exactly the concept that finances are very intentional. And when people, the quicker people realize that this is intentional and really you're the master of your finances. Obviously, there's a lot more into play. There are external factors. I'm well aware of that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not so non-empathetic why I don't understand that there are external factors and times where life just deals you a bad hand. But for the most part, for a lot of people that I've consulted with, a lot of times, like, you're the master of your finances. And if you don't understand that, you lack that intentionality in terms of knowing exactly where your money is going before it even arrives, you're probably in a bad position. So that's just something to think about. So I'm just giving a synopsis.
That's facts. Because even with myself, like, I have this Excel sheet that's like, right now it's like 10 pages where I track my trades, I track my budgeting, I track my, like, I've actually been working on this budget for like 3 weeks now, because I'm doing it percentage-wise, right? Where I know I want to entertain, I know I want to go out. And I'm doing exactly the same thing you're doing. I'm doing the 40, what did you say, 40? I think I did 40, but I think for me, 35%
40, 35, 25.
Yeah, 35% of my money is going towards investments, 40 for necessities. And then I've done like my budget so far, and I see that I'm 14% over what I'm supposed to be projectively making. And I'm like, okay, now I got to find out how I'm going to cut other things out without cutting my savings and investments. So that's like something you got to take seriously, because it's not as easy as people think it is. They're like, the average American is how much dollars in debt? Maybe $10,000, $20,000 in debt. Like, it is not. People just assume that a high-paying job means you have stacks. People like Kanye West were $50 million in debt like a couple of years ago. So you got to take it like seriously.
Crazy thing. I was looking at Forbes the other day, because, you know, I've been really big on preaching. Those who follow me on Twitter knows I've been big on preaching. Like, young people, please start tracking your net worth. Now I was saying, okay, the average 25-year-old, what is their net worth? And I saw that the average 25-year-old in America, their net worth is actually negative.
Yeah, I saw
like,
that.
You can't believe that. The average 25-year-old, their net worth is actually negative, which is crazy to me, because I'm just like, damn, that's insane. That's really insane, because
I believe that, because student loans take up.
I mean, that's facts. Yeah, I feel that.
Thank God, man. Student loans.
Like me personally, I have student loans, so I can tell you that it is. If you're gonna, and this is another advice, if you just graduated from college, that first 2 years of your life, think about paying your student loans off. Just think about paying. Like, for instance, I told you about, I'm getting the house I'm trying to get, right? So my student loans are currently $23,400, right?
That's not even that bad, bro.
It's not that
a lot
bad,
of what
actually.
I heard. Yeah,
it's not that bad.
It might even get forgiven soon under Biden.
I hope so. So I was talking to the mortgage lender, and she was like, okay, she's calculating my
DTI,
mortgage DTI. She's like, okay, we're gonna use 10% of your student loans. And I'm like, first of all, my student loan payments are $150. I plan on paying my student loans like in 1 year anyways, because let me just say realistically 2 years. Let's say 2 years, because things come and go. You have to enjoy your life, right? So so I'm like, just imagine what $250 can do to your buying power when you're trying to get a house. And people have $90,000 of student loans. So imagine they're gonna take 10% of that, and they're like, okay, your DTI, I mean, you have $900 of debt canceled out from your buying power. And I'm like, wow. Imagine if without that, you can, at that point in time, if you're only making like 60, 70K, you basically can't do anything. So it's like, you gotta be very intentional.
Yeah.
Let,
I'm
let,
gonna give
let's
a caveat real quick to what
yeah.
you said about because like I said, someone like me, I'm not good with money. Like I just know how to spend money and things like little things like thank God for the friends I have. Shout out to Ife. You get what I'm saying? Getting in that like
Mhm.
hanging around with the right people to helps you get in that mind frame
Facts.
where you
Yeah.
don't have to, you know what I'm saying? I was intentional trying to be friends with David because I was seeing all he was doing, all he was talking about, and I was like, okay, I like this talk. Because if I was on my own, I'm not gonna lie to you. When you see that money in your account, is
Oh no,
it's you just
man.
see it and you're no intentional about it. You just see it and you're just like, yeah, I want this, I want that. That's how my brain works. I'm just going shopping real
Mhm.
quick. So like you have to be intentional, like David said, figure out your
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
And like with the when it comes to like the budgeting, because I use the 50-30-20, right? I use like the
Mhm.
normal template.
Mhm.
A question I had was with the savings, because I didn't understand like emergency fund invested. Do you get your emergency fund out of the way first,
Yeah.
then figure out your
Thousand percent.
investing?
Thousand
Okay.
percent. And you hear some wild shit like even people like, oh, don't worry about emergency fund. Put your emergency funds in the stock market. I'm like, bullshit. Don't do
Bro,
that.
that's what I used to
Like,
think too.
I'm like, don't do that because I'm just like, I really hate when people do that because I'm just like, it really shows me when you say that or automatically assume you only started investing in 2020 during this bull
Mm,
run. People have never, I have, I have been in that 2017 chop where the
Oh,
pool
the
people who were
pullback.
trading that Nova, the pullback was insane. Like, see, you don't want to be caught where your emergency fund, something happens, life really happens. You could literally be in a car crash one day, God forbid, you survive,
mm,
have to handle certain bills. You all of a sudden you need like to pull out $8,000, and you don't
mm.
want to be in the case where the market corrects 30% and your $15,000-$16,000 emergency fund is all of a sudden like I don't know
9K.
9K or some shit. Maybe not
Mm.
even that much, but maybe like 12K. And then you don't have enough time to recover the money back because obviously you need the money right now. Like, no, like there are
Can liquidate.
options. In fact, I am more. You wanna be risky a little bit with emergency funds. I am more open to buying stable coins, cryptocurrency, because some of the interests on these stable coins are ridiculous. Like Binance USD. Like if you don't understand stable coins, you probably don't even need to listen to what I'm saying right now. But for those
Mm,
who are tenured enough in cryptocurrency, understand what I mean by stable coins. Stable coins are like pretty much they're backed by something. But like for instance, USD
USDT.
Theta, USD coin, these are all stable coins, cryptocurrency. So they follow the US dollar. Binance USD has an APR right now of 60.1%.
mm.
There is risk. These are not FDIC insured. There is risk
True.
associated with them, but at least I'll say that is even more less risky than compared to putting in the stock market. I'm even more open to that, although I don't even do it. Even I'm being honest with you, I don't do it. In fact, the only ones I will recommend that is I'll say is reasonable risk is USD coin or USD Theta because there's just so much billions of dollars backing it that I'm like, your
Mm.
$20,000-$30,000 emergency funds is
Fun.
not. I wouldn't be shaking about that. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, anyways, going back to this, I'll say yes, absolutely. Build your emergency savings first, and then start investing. And because people don't even realize when you have the emergency savings. So if you say, okay, these are 6 months worth of my living expenses, right? And obviously, that puts you in a better frame of mind to even branch out and do other investments. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
Yeah.
you
that
feel like
allows you
more. You could take more risk.
you can take more
Yeah,
risk. And if people don't realize it's a psychological thing. It's like, I'm comfortable doing this. I'm comfortable doing that. And I strongly believe that while you're young, this is the time to take risks. So
for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely, 1,000% that I am all for that. But let's talk about something you talked about. You talked about debt. And I'll say this is something that I want Nigerians listening to understand. I had this conversation with one of my big cousins in Charlotte. He went to an MBA school. He got student loan debt. He has a house. He's focusing solely on paying. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, listen, I am not opposed to the no debt mentality. I call that the Dave Ramsey mentality.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it, but especially if you don't have the discipline. But I'll say I'm against certain type of debt. Let me preface this by saying I'm against like car notes. I'm against like credit card debt. I think these are debts you should absolutely avoid, in my opinion, because these are non-cash flowing debt. I spoke this on my Patreon. Any debt that my principle is this: any debt that I cannot cash flow, I don't want it. So if I'm going to take a car note, my question is this going to be something I will put on Turo, or is this something I'll put on, like, plan on renting to cash flow? If it's a personal car, I don't want it, because I'm like, my principle is, can I cash flow this? What is my rate on return on this debt that I'm taking? And that's why this similar to mortgage. That's why I talk about the cash on cash return. Again, when I take this mortgage on this rental property, this is what my monthly payments would be. My goal is to reduce that monthly payments as much as I can, which is why I typically like to take the 30-year loans versus the 15 years, lower the interest rates as much as I can. And then my question is, okay, what's the cash to cash return? Like, is the return on this investment worth it? Like, is it going to be such that I can make enough bread on this to obviously pay off, one, the debt payments, which is the cost of the mortgage or the cost of the rental, and get enough, like, cash flow and returns on the investments? And so it's something, it's called understanding leverage, because it's something that even the wealthiest of Americans utilize this. And I want Nigerians in America to understand this. The wealthiest of Americans utilize this. The wealthiest of Americans are always looking for ways to use other people's money, whether it's the bank's money, your money, other people's money. If they can avoid using their personal money, access to capital. Thank you, Joe. And so, like, I know we come from a society where cash is king. And I know for a lot of people, the idea is like, sometimes I think sometimes I do agree with the mentality, like, tell your college folks not to have a credit card, because sometimes college people are just irresponsible. Like, I might have been irresponsible.
If I had gone to college, I promise you, I
probably would have been irresponsible. I get that, but just understand that, especially if you're graduating, that's another tip. When you're graduating, you need to be responsible. I have a credit card. I use my credit card. First of all, I like the returns. I use my Delta Sky Miles. I even upgrade, because the bonus, don't travel. Sleep. Oh my God, do not sleep. I don't even like look for things to like boost my miles. No, I just use my card for regular expenses, everyday expenses. Even when I go to a bar, I use it to buy a drink. And like, bro, like the way, like every 3-4 months, I've accumulated enough miles to get a free trip, basically. Especially when you have these boosts and you upgrade. So like, don't sleep on that. I love that. But my mentality with credit card is always this: I do not spend money I don't have in the checking. So basically, every week, sometimes before it used to be at the end of each month, but now it's every week. I literally look at all my expenses, I tally them, and then on Saturdays, I pay it off from my checking, move it. So I do not ever use my credit card. So I have like over $20,000 limits on my credit card, but I'm not out here spending to max out my credit card. I spend what is within the budget. Within that 25%, 40, 35, 25, I spend what's within the budget. And so people need to just
I will say that
build that discipline.
Because like we live in a day and age where people, it's like, this is another thing I just want to mention. Like, when you come out of college, the average college student you don't have money. So like, you don't need, like, we know fashion is this, you want to do that, want to do this. You can't be out here buying $500 sneakers when you're not even, your normal income is not, you don't have that bandwidth. You feel me?
Bro.
That goes back to get the right friends. That's all I'm saying. Getting the right group of friends. Because
Can I tell y'all something? Crazy?
Yeah.
I owned the most clothes and designer shit when I was the brokest.
Facts. Hey man, David, you know you got those. What the name of those slides again, bro? I always say, bro. People
listen.
When you have Gucci slides, you don't call them slides. You say my Gucci slides. You don't say my slides. My Gucci slides.
Okay, listen. Okay, don't get me wrong. I want to be clear about something. You might see me with 1 or 2 designer items. You might see me with, especially I like watches. You might see me with a nice timepiece. And I might splurge every now and then, but I'm telling you guys, like, even now, when I look at how much I spent on fashion items, like now, in the past year, compared to what I spent in 2017. In 2017, like, don't get me wrong, I could afford it. Again, it was within the budget once. It was within 25%. I could afford it. But I was spending a lot of my extra cash on, like, designer stuff. Like, I wanted, like, this new belt, this new shoe, this new that, this new that, this new that. And the crazy thing is like now, like most times, if I have free cash, I'm already looking at putting it towards extra investments, investing in this, investing in that, diversifying something, or just gifting it to
Yeah, and
family, friends, loved ones.
that's
And so,
important because like
but
I'm
yeah,
working on my budget right now, and I realize that we have our baskets, we have our needs, we have our wants, entertainment fees. People forget that there are unforeseen expenses. Like Christmas will come around, or maybe you'll get a wife, or I said wife, get a girlfriend, or blah blah blah, go on a date, right?
You feel what Mario? You feel what Mario?
No, man, I'm cool. But then you forget that, okay, let's say my entertainment expenses is 500, 600 every month, and you're spending that every single month. When Christmas comes around, you got like me, I put it into my budget that I need like a entertainment or miscellaneous savings. So like even if it's $100 a month, save that, because you don't know, there might be a day your friend just randomly says, oh, let's go out, and you're like, oh, I didn't budget for that, blah blah blah. You don't want to be in that particular case, but you don't want to be in the case where you're also caught up. So it's like certain things like that. Don't just spend all your money. Keep like, I don't know, entertainment savings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
just
and
be intentional about every single detail.
Right. And let me clear this. I'm not saying if your thing is designer, I'm not saying don't. Like, I'm not even gonna sit here and tell you like you should not have your splurge and needs, but I'm just saying like it's crazy to me how like when I think about that though. Okay, let me put it this way. I was more worried about being perceived, and I thought for a young dude out of college, I was doing pretty well, but I was more worried about being perceived as having a bag when I was at my, again, by net worth, when I was at my brokest compared to now. Like, no, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit.
Bro,
You can
stay with the white tees, bro. That's all I'm gonna tell you.
Bro, no, I literally see. If I knows, every time I go out, I always wear my black tee, bro. I always wear my black tee. I don't give a shit. Bro. You might see me with a Gucci slide every now and then, but that's okay. I mean, you might sometimes gotta splurge, but yeah, I don't give a shit about all those things. But going back to the topic though, I think like for if I was a young dude, young lady coming out of college, your focus is let's talk about 401ks. If you could get a Roth 401k, I absolutely recommend that, especially if you think one, your salary will progress over time, and two, I am willing to bet that obviously, I've talked about this on my Twitter page, why you probably want to, as a young person, go for a Roth 401k than a traditional 401k is because a Roth 401k, I believe that obviously taxes, especially with inflation, tax rate will definitely go up over time in the long run. So you're probably better off. And I did like a mathematical scenario to like do the math just where you see. So yeah, Roth 401k if you can. If you cannot, if you don't have the option of a Roth 401k, obviously you want to capture the max for your company's match, and then you contribute the rest to a Roth IRA. Eventually, you might no longer be eligible for a Roth IRA like I am now. And so what you want to do then is start looking at building your own personal investment portfolio. And I talk about that on the Patreon. And
but I thought there were like back doors for the Roth IRA. Like if you contribute to a Roth 401k, you can always roll it over or something like that.
No, yes, but I've forgotten the details. I know like you can't directly contribute to the Roth IRA once you hit a certain income limit. So there's the limits on those. But yeah, I mean, but I think Roth 401k is separate though. You can always, I mean, obviously there's the limit you can contribute, but Roth 401k follows the same rules as a Roth as a traditional 401k. Yeah, and then regarding that, I'll say the main focus is, I know they'll tell you max your 401k. I mean, I've always been a believer on I max the match. Reason why is I believe thinking in terms of opportunity cost again. Always, when you start investing, you always start thinking in terms of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is basically the next best investments. And so basically, when I look at the 401k, I always ask myself, okay, if I decide to max my 401k, put this extra beyond my company's match towards the 401k, do I feel like there's other investment opportunities where I know I'll beat the returns on the 401k or the mutual funds or the blended funds in the 401k? which are averaging like 12, 13% a year. And the chances are the answer typically is yes. I feel like I could beat that. And so that's why I personally don't. If you don't have any other investment avenues right now that you're working on, obviously by all means max it. But if you know that there are other things that you could do that you feel like you could beat the returns, again, concept of opportunity cost, you definitely want to do that. Look at the 40, 35, 25 rule. Build. We're probably going to wrap up here now because I don't want this to be extended, but build your emergency funds, start investing, start dollar cost averaging, understand compounding interest, understand why that is in your favor now as a young 20-something-year-old versus if you're in like your 30s, 40s, because time is in your favor. So compounding interest is in your favor. And also look at other investment vehicles like the IUL, Index Universal Life Insurance. We could probably talk about this on a separate episode.
Yeah,
but like,
another episode.
These are other ways you can. That's a huge way to build wealth. Life insurance. It's a huge way to build wealth. Especially Black people, a lot of us, even in Nigeria too, a lot of us, our parents die. Unfortunately, we don't have things like life insurance policies that have been set up where there's a huge payout, and then you just don't have to worry about a lot of stuff. But IULs is like Index Universal Life Insurance. You don't just have the life insurance policy, but you're also accumulating value within your life insurance over time. Like for instance, now I have an IUL set up, and basically the way it works is it's a $500,000 IUL, and in 40 years, so when I'm in my mid 60s, it's supposed to have close to 600, and I'm only paying $300 a month for it. But in 40 years, it's supposed to have close to $600,000 value built up. So I have $600,000 accumulated value within the policy, $500,000 within, which is the policy premium itself. And so if I die at the age of 65, for instance, my beneficiaries will have close to $1.1 million just paid out. Because
David, can I be a beneficiary?
Nigga, shut up. But just because, but this is an example of building wealth. Just because of something I did and I was paying monthly throughout the course of my life. And God forbid, obviously, I hope I live longer, but this is just something that, and then there's also the concept of I can flip it towards where my beneficiary actually becomes an estate. And so if it becomes an estate, I avoid something they call estate taxes here in the USA. And then if I do that, I can also flip it to become even a, what do you call those things? Trust fund. So you become a trust fund where the beneficiary is an estate. So you become a trust fund towards an estate. And basically, I don't only avoid estate taxes, it's also, I can now control like payouts towards like the beneficiaries. And then it's like, imagine if you find, God forbid, your grandparents died today and you realize, oh, your grandparents have a $1.2 million trust fund that has been set up for you and your siblings. And basically, you guys now all of a sudden are receiving like a $6,000, $7,000 check monthly for the next 25 to 30 years. Like imagine how much of a difference that makes, like an extra $6,000, $7,000 a year,
right?
That you're just getting. That is what white people do, knowledgeable white people in careers. That's what a lot of executives in top companies like 3M, for instance, a lot of the executives receive payouts in terms of life insurance and IULs. I've spoken about this on my Patreon. And people just don't know about this. And it's crazy because people don't understand the different financial vehicles and wheels just to your disposal. We can also talk about annuities, but again, there's no time for that.
So, no time for that. Yeah, that's another episode.
Let's wrap up.
To my college students, like I saw this quote on Instagram yesterday and it resonated with me. If you didn't come from a wealthy family, make sure a wealthy family comes from you.
Big facts.
Big
gem right there.
And let me add to that. Make sure a wealthy family comes from you, and you should be more aggressive in your pursuits to be knowledgeable about a lot of financial topics and financial vehicles, because a lot of wealthy people, they already know this. Like they grew up in this, so they know a lot of this information. But think about how behind you are because you don't. So that's that.
Get good friends that argument things you don't know, so you be good.
Facts.
All right, man.
Well, let's with that. That's another episode of Finance and Vibes. Today we're just talking about things we knew as fresh college grads, and hopefully this was helpful and I'll be easy.
All right, man. Be easy, bro.
Be safe, everybody.
Yeah.